Right, welcome to the UTA webinar 2026. Good topic to start with is tapering because that is what has already started. Just over 2 weeks to go. So this is basically the first week of taper. The midweek session should have been a little bit shorter. The long run this weekend is going to be quite a bit shorter, and you should, in theory, be starting to feel a little bit fresher, but that may not have happened yet. Um, so the way I sometimes describe it to people is that if your body is like a sponge, and over the last 16 weeks, you've basically been squeezing water out of the sponge bit by bit. The recovery weeks top it up, but not top it up fully. And this 3 week taper is basically trying to fill that sponge right back up. And it often takes until the last couple of days before that actually happens. So you should still be aiming to run the same. Oh, here's Tamara joining us, I think. Still running the same number of runs per week. The intensity stays the same. So if you're doing hill reps or things like that, then the intensity is about the same. But because the session is shorter, then you're not taking as many cookies out of the jar. And then the long run's a lot shorter. So that's where you're really probably topping up the sponge. And so if at the moment you're still feeling a bit flat or a bit off, or you're starting to feel a bit fidgety and you're not feeling like your legs are as fresh as they should be, don't worry. That will hopefully happen over the next couple of weeks. I think there's a fair bit of psychology involved as well. I can clearly remember numerous times I take the train down to Sydney to work, and then in the week leading up to a race, I can be walking up the stairs to the train station and feel like my legs are completely dead and think, oh my God, if I can't walk up one flight of stairs, how am I going to run the UTA 100 with 10,000 stairs in a few days' time? But I think that it's mostly psychological. So your brain starts playing tricks on you, and you've got to just trust that you've done all the work. And if you haven't done the work, it's too late anyway. And yeah, fingers crossed, everything will freshen up on race day. Caffeine. So actually, there was a few on caffeine. People wanted to know what to do with caffeine. Um, John sent a question saying, I was wondering what you would recommend for a caffeine strategy for the UTA 100. I haven't run longer than a marathon. I'd normally have a coffee pre-run, but it feels like I'd be better saving caffeine till closer to halfway. So if it was me, I have a coffee pretty much before every run. So I would have a coffee before the UTA 100. And then in the second half, when I'm feeling flat, I often resort to Coke. Coke also works pretty well for my stomach. So it's obviously got a lot of caffeine in it, and it's very simple sugar. So I'm also, I think it's 2011 was the last day I didn't have a coffee. So I am I'm not very caffeine sensitive. I think caffeine sensitive people probably have to be more careful. I can drink a double espresso and go to sleep 10 minutes later. So for me, it doesn't matter if I have a coffee beforehand, but for you, John, it might do if you feel like you're sensitive to coffee. And if you want to save that sort of, if you get a buzz from coffee when you're running and you feel like you want to save it, then yeah, having it in the second half is probably a good idea.
Yeah, so I think that answer is perfect, Mark, that you just said. The only thing I would add to that is um, the only risk that you have with caffeine is that it can elevate your heart rate. So I would not have it right before a steep climb or stairs. Because your heart rate can go up when you've just had some caffeine, so it might elevate your heart rate a little bit too much. The other thing just to note is that the guidelines on how much caffeine you can have in a 24-hour period, they're very anecdotal, but it's generally around 5 to 6 times your body weight over a 24-hour period. So if you work out how much caffeine you need if you're 70 kilos and you're doing 6 times body weight, you need to work, what's that, 400, it's my maths, 420 grams of caffeine over the 24-hour period. So you need to look at your labels and work out how much caffeine you're having in each of your items. It's very variable. So some gels will have 25 milligrams of caffeine. Others will have 50. Some of the newer gels that have come out that are the big flow packs, like the 90-gram gels that pH Nutrition and Pure, that they're doing caffeine, they've got 200 milligrams of caffeine in them. So you really need to check your labels. Don't just kind of read the word caffeine and think it's okay. You actually have to look at how many milligrams of caffeine is in each of your products, and then don't go more than 6 times your body weight over the 24-hour period.
I'm going to add another question to that then. So rather than think about where in the race you are, would you think about caffeine in terms of time of the day? Because there seems like there's lots to talk about people getting the most tired. This is going to be for the people that are out there all night. So the milers and I guess the people that are going to be
Yeah.
going for 18 hours plus in the 100. But would you, like, people talk about a real flat spot at about 2 o'clock in the morning. So would you maybe save some caffeine for 2 o'clock in the morning instead of necessarily having it at, well, 60K or 70K?
Yes, I would, but just being mindful that what happens with caffeine is that it builds up over time. So I would probably start it at kind of 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. So you
Oh,
could
okay.
start having it then. And yeah, absolutely save some in the dark there. Save some until later at night. But you can start a little bit earlier in the day as well. That'll give you the advantage through the night. So if you are someone who's going to be running kind of at 2, 3, 4 a.m., I'd probably have caffeine around 10 and midnight because
Okay.
it takes a while to kick in to keep you awake. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Would you actually focus on trying to eat more carbs in those 2 or 3 days leading up to the race?
Yes, I would. And so the guideline on that is 8 to 12. So I'll just take the average, say 10 times your body weight in carbs per day. So if you weigh, again, 70 kilos, you need 700 grams of carbohydrate I do the days prior to the race. So you need 700 grams of carbs on Friday and Saturday. If it's it's a Saturday race. So Thursday, Friday, you need 700 grams of carbs if you're 70 kilos. So 10 times your body weight in the 2 days prior is kind of the guidelines. If you're not used to eating that much carb, it can make you feel bloated and heavy. So I'd go maybe about 8 times body weight, maybe even down to 7 if you really don't like it. But it is a massive advantage to eat carbohydrates in those 2 days. If you're not sure on what 700 grams of carbs looks like, it's a lot of carbohydrate, and there's not then a lot of room for protein or fat in that day because you just won't fit it into your stomach. Like, it's just too much food. So you need to really cut back on your protein and your fat and get the carbohydrates in. If you don't know what that looks like, it's really easy to throw into ChatGPT and go, give me a meal plan for 700 grams of carbohydrate for a day. It'll be lots of things like white bread, pasta, rice, juice. You can use sports products if you want to. The key thing I would say when you're eating that much carbohydrate, you need to keep it really low fiber, because if you have too much fiber with that carbohydrate, you get a lot of GI uncomfortable kind of stress and symptoms. So you need to eat white things so that you're keeping the fiber part of it low as well. So yes, you do get an advantage of carb loading because you're not moving, but there is also an advantage to actually change your diet to be mostly carbohydrate. So depending on how much someone eats, it may not actually be extra calories for the day. It could be the same.
Just
It's
change.
just that it's all carbohydrates rather than a combination of protein, fat, and carb. Does that make sense?
And
So
is that
because there's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. So 4 sevens are 32. So that's like, it's only 3,000 calories, which a lot
oh,
of people that are on this call would be eating that a day anyway. Most people would be eating about that. If they've been training for 100K, they should be eating about 3,000 calories anyway. So it's not that you're necessarily eating more calories. It's just that all your calories are coming from carbohydrates in those 2 days prior.
and is that any different for whether you're running the 22 or the 100 miler? Like the 10 times body weight, or you just all try and load up anyway?
Well, I think what the difference is actually more what your goal is. So if you're front of the pack on the 22, like if you're trying to get a podium, well, yeah, you would follow the same guideline, and same in the 100. If you're if you're a back of the pack runner and you're just out for a nice day out and you just really don't feel like eating all that, then fine, that's okay. But if you really want to make sure that you're getting the best possible advantage or your best PB or the best possible time that you can do, then yes, it's the same for 22 as it is for 100. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I've got two more questions, which I think will be, they've come in from emails and I think they're relevant for everyone.
Yep.
And then we'll let you go to your party or whatever it is you're
Oh no,
doing.
I'm home now. Just
Okay.
in
Oh,
the
good. Right.
driveway.
Okay. Okay. Um, Now there's quite a few questions about when should I eat breakfast, and obviously if a race kicks off at 6 o'clock, having breakfast 3 hours before it is it's doable, but it's tricky getting up at 3. Do you have a best time for breakfast on race morning?
Yep. So I wouldn't worry too much about it if it's only an hour or an hour and a half before, because what you're going to have for breakfast is really low fiber, low protein, low fat. Anyway, it's going to be very easily digestible carbohydrate. So it's going to be white bread, banana, honey, things like that. So you don't want a lot of fiber in that breakfast. So it should digest within an hour or 90 minutes anyway. To be honest, if you even just to get to the start line of UTA is going to you're going to be at least an hour before your race starts. The logistics of the race. So I would say 90 minutes to an hour is fine to digest that. If you're someone who really struggles to hop up and eat that quickly, take it with you. Just take a banana and a Cliff Bar with you to the start line. Eat it on the bus or in the car or while you're waiting around. And then if you can't quite manage to get enough breakfast in, just up your intake of your race nutrition right from the get-go. So just have a little bit more in that first section. Everyone should be starting to fuel within the first hour anyway, but if you haven't managed to get a decent breakfast in, and for breakfast most people will be looking about kind of 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrate for breakfast, which might be hard, but like I said, just take a banana, a Cliff Bar, and if you can't get it in, start really early into your race. Half an hour into the race, start having the nutrition straight away to kind of make up for the gap. If you're a later starter time, then you've got more time. So essentially, the more carbs you get in, the better you will do, is the answer to the kind of question. So whether you're starting early or later, doesn't matter, 22 or 100. Carbs are your friend always, and the more you can get in, the better you'll feel and the better your race will be.
Yep. Okay, cool. My second question, my understanding is if you have some have sugar, so carbs, without
Yep.
exercising, you then release insulin and your blood sugar goes down. You can, so if you have a gel, say 30 minutes before the start line, you can be on a bit of a sugar low when that happens. So if you're going to have it, if you want to have a gel on the start line, have it like 10 to 15 minutes before. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. So, absolutely, that is correct. And I would not encourage anyone to have sports drink while you're hanging around either, or a gel. So, stick to things like Cliff Bars and bananas because they've got more fiber in them. They're still very low fiber, but they still have some compared to a gel and a sports drink. So, it's going to slow down that digestion of the carbohydrate. When you start having a gel or a sports drink, there's absolutely zero fiber in that. It's straight to your bloodstream, which is what you want, but you need to be moving when that happens. So you don't want to be sitting still and have a gel because, yes, you will get a high blood sugar. And then insulin comes in, takes the sugar out of your bloodstream and stores it because that's what insulin does. So you want to make sure that you have that it hits your system when you're about to start moving. So 10 minutes before you
Yeah,
could have
right.
a gel.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And don't
Um,
sip on sports drink. The biggest disaster is to walk around the start line sipping on your sports drink. Do not do that. Sip on water if you're nervous. A lot of people like to have something to sip on. So have some water and I keep saying Cliff Bar, but whatever brand, doesn't matter, like a bar or like a bread roll or hot cross bun if they're still around. Banana, you can have things like that and some water while you're walking around waiting, and then don't have your gel until 10 minutes before.
or quite a few of those electrolyte drinks, the ones that the dissolvable tablets have got zero carbs, haven't they? So you could be sipping on
Yep.
electrolyte drink rather than water.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
As long as it's got zero carbs in it.
yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Um, okay, that was it for my questions. Have you got anything else that you've? I feel like that's the last sort of the 3 days leading up to the race that we've sort of covered pretty well. But any other pearls of wisdom? Look, what you said before about the more carbs the better. Which now there's more and more and more evidence that the more carbs you can take, but it comes with a huge caveat of not getting sick. The more carbs you can take, the better you're going to feel, the faster you'll end up finishing, and the quicker you'll recover afterwards. But then, yeah, if you have too much, you vomit.
You're sick. Yeah. So probably the biggest thing, so you're right, there is a big kind of shift in the last kind of 12 months even just to actually, a lot of the kind of pro athletes that advertise all this stuff are doing, 90, 120, 140. I saw one the other day, 160 grams of carbohydrate an hour in an Ironman race, which is insane. But for kind of average Joe Blow, people, not elite athletes that aren't doing this all the time, your gut's not used to absorbing that. So you can't really do that straight off the bat. You've got to build up to that over a long period of time. So yes, still the concept more is better. Probably the biggest thing that I see with people that start increasing that carb intake is that they're not matching their water intake to get the carbs to dilute efficiently in the body. So carbs like to be in about a 10% solution. So if you're trying to push 70, 80, 90 grams of carbohydrate, to get that into a 10% solution, you need to be having 700, 800, 900 mils of water to make the 10% ratio. So you can't just jam more carbs in and not increase your water. So you can't have 90 grams of carb, but only 500 mils of water. It will work for about the first 4 or 5 hours because your body has got water in the intestines and the bowel and the stomach. So you'll draw water out of those organs to get the carbs to dilute properly. But once you're 4 or 5 hours into a race, that residual water is all used up. So you have to have enough water to get the carbs to digest properly. And the biggest thing that happens is you feel sick, you feel nauseous. And if that happens, my suggestion is actually be sick if you can, get the carbs out and start again. But trying to remember that the more carbs you put in, the more water you need to digest those carbohydrates. So that's the biggest thing just with this change with people moving to more carbs. Yeah.
When you say water, that could be any fluid. So if I was drinking Coke, that's obviously going to have some sugar in it. It's also got a truckload of fluid.
Yes. Yeah, no, fluid. Yep. So if you're having a sports drink that's made up, so if you're following the directions of any sports drink company, they always make them up in about a 6 to 8% solution. Tailwind suggests 10%. So Tailwind's like 50 grams of carb per 500 mils. If you're using something like pH Nutrition, there's this 30 grams of carb per 500 mils. So that's a 6% solution. So that water, that 500 mils that you've got the sports drink in, is counted in that. But the problem is if you have a sports drink and then you add on your sandwich and your gel and your chews, you've got to add more water to get the dilution. You need to work out how many grams of carb in total, including the sports drink, and how many mils of water, including the sports drink. And most people will need to top up with extra water to get that dilution right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then Coke, absolutely. Coke is an 11% solution. So Coke is 11 grams of carb per 100 mils. So it's an 11% solution. So you just get away with it because it's all averages. But if you're only on Coke, it's fine. It'll work because it's 11%. But if you have Coke and then try and have a gel and wash it down with Coke, your gel's 25 grams of carbohydrate. You've got to add 250 mils of water to that scenario. Otherwise, you're going to have too much carbohydrate again.
Okay, cool. That is awesome. Thank you. Right. Okay. I think we'll let you go back inside. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Yeah.
If there's anything else, maybe just chuck it onto the Facebook group or something. I'm happy if anyone.
Yeah, we'll start a Facebook thread for some questions afterwards. There's bound to be some.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Mara. Thank you very much.
Right.
Have a good night.
Bye. Bye.
Yep. Right. Wow, that was very good. So that has covered nutrition, and we've also covered tapering. I'm going to talk about pacing strategy. Again, there's been a few questions about this. So the pacing is obviously going to be different depending on your level of experience and also on the length of the race that you've entered. I'll go through them one by one, just the notes that I've written. For the miler, my advice for a miler is always start slower than you think you need to and eat more than you think you need to, what Tamara was just talking about then. And then I think a good rough expectation of finish time, just to sort of put your brain in the right place with how long you're going to be out there, which also helps a bit with pacing, is that you're going to be somewhere close to doubling your 100K time. So when you get to 100K in, let's say, 15 hours, then if you can finish in 30 hours, you're probably doing a pretty good job. So I think that helps sort of set expectation levels of how fast you're going, how you're feeling. So you sort of need to have 50% of your cookies in the jar still at 100K, which obviously is pretty hard. For the 100, it's still the same thing. For most people, it's going to be a fairly slow, conservative start. Start walking pretty early. So there's some of the hills early on the course you could probably run up, but you probably should walk up so you've got more energy later in the day. You can make up an awful lot of time or awful lot of places in the second half of those long races just by slowing down less than everybody else slows down, because pretty much everyone does slow down. So yeah, start slow and eat plenty. For the 50, some people will be trying to beat a PB. And then so that puts a certain sort of expectation level of where on the course you're going to be at certain times or a certain pace. If you know that and you know it well, and you know your body and you've done a few 50K races and you feel like you can push hard at the start, then that's okay. But if it's your first 50 and you're building, this is going to be the longest race you've ever done, again, just start slow and think of trying to save energy for later in the course. And a good way of doing that is walk up stuff that you think you'd either run up in training or that you could potentially run up, but get into the hill hiking and the stair hiking early in the race. The 22, that is the one that I think, to be honest, goes pear-shaped the most often, and it's probably the hardest one to pace, and it is because it starts with the downhill. So everyone gets a bit carried away. Your heart rate's going to be relatively low compared to the pace you're running. Everyone else is going fast, so you sort of feel like you need to go fast. And then you get to the creek, and it is amazing how many people's wheels fall off very early in the race, and it's just because they went too hard down the hill, harder than they've ever done in training. So they cook their legs and run out of energy, and then it makes the second half pretty miserable. So for the 22, I would highly recommend just being a bit conservative down the hill. If everyone's running away from you, you're probably going to pass all of them again on the uphill, and that's a very satisfying feeling. So yeah, start that conservatively. The 11, the 11 I'd sort of liken a little bit to a half marathon. So if you're doing a half marathon and you've done a few before, you can actually push the pace fairly hard. I liken it to a half marathon because it's probably going to take a similar amount of time, even though it's only 11K, because there's so many stairs and so many hills. So if you hopefully you've trained on some stairs, because the stairs really do hurt your legs if you're not used to them. If you feel like you can run for an hour and a half or 2 hours at a pretty high intensity, then you can probably start the 11 pretty quickly. If it's your first 11, you'll be amazed how slow and how hard it is. So again, be conservative. The further stairs, don't save. This is my advice pretty much to everybody. Don't save your energy for the Ferbers. Lots of people talk about the Ferbers like they're the worst thing in the world. That's actually probably the most, maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I think it's one of the most enjoyable kilometers of the race. You've nearly finished, so psychologically, you know you're going to get to the top of the stairs and then you're done. But also in the shorter races, the 11, the 22, and probably to a certain element, the 50, there's often a queue of people. So if you've saved your energy and you're stuck behind a queue of people, you're not going to be able to use it anyway. You might have spent most of your cookies before the further stairs. And then even if you haven't got a queue of people, they're so hard to get up in terms of to run up that you're going to be hiking anyway. And the difference between when you're feeling fresh and hiking and when you're feeling cooked and hiking is probably not that much different compared to the overall time of the race or the overall time that you're out there. The only time that advice is incorrect is if you start cramping, which does happen. I've seen people that have had to sit on a chair halfway up the Ferbers and wait for half an hour for their cramp to disappear. Um, Actually, we didn't cover that in the nutrition, so I'll very briefly talk about cramping as well. But yeah, don't save your energy for the Ferbers. Yeah, spend 99% of them by the bottom of the Ferbers. Cramp, the best way, we didn't actually have any emails about cramp, interesting, but cramp is very common if you haven't done enough training in the Blue Mountains because of the stairs. Stairs make your legs work in different ways than usual if you haven't practiced them enough in training. And that often causes hamstring and adductor cramp. So your hamstrings and adductors kick in to help you move when your glutes and your quads start getting tired, which they do on the stairs. The best way, in my experience, to switch off cramp, to stop it happening once it's started, is to chew on salt. So there's the cramp fix and pickle juice. There's those sort of commercial products where the idea is to get some sort of a bitter or salty flavor in your mouth. And that triggers some nerves in your brain, which makes your brain think that you've actually got salt in your bloodstream, and then it makes your muscles relax. For me, I just use salt capsules. I got some of those. I can't remember the name of the someone can write it on the screen. The 1,000 milligram salt capsules. I had them in the Hounslow last year. It's pretty disgusting. They come in a thick capsule which are designed to be swallowed, but you have to chew on them if you've got cramp. So you chew the capsule until it splits open in your mouth, and then you get a horrible mouthful of salt. And that is a very good way, precision fuel it is, a very good way of switching the cramp off. So yeah, if you're cramping, have a supply of salt and chew on that. I think they'll probably have maybe even just salt sachets at the checkpoints. So again, if you've been cramping, grab a few salt sachets so you can pop them in the mouth while you're moving along. The course breakdown, probably most people either will or should know this. The UTA miler, the first 40K is the steepest and most brutal part of the course. It's in the Gross Valley, which the Perry's Look Down, the stairs that you run down, pretty close to exactly 3 times the Firbers. So it just gives you an idea of how big the Gross Valley is compared to the Jamison, where the rest of the course is. So another reason to start slow in the miler is the fact that the course is very steep. It's quite technical and it's pretty slow. It's slow for everybody. So if you're behind what you think your time expectation should be, don't get stressed because it's going to be slow for everyone and hard for everyone. You really need to get through that section feeling as good as you can, and then you'll be able to start moving again once you get past Medlow Bath. Nellie's Glen is the other one. So you hit Nellie's Glen in both the miler and the 100K. It's a very steep staircase. You usually feel pretty rubbish at the top of it just because it's taking quite a lot of energy to get up it. And then it's a bit of a slog through the bush to the aquatic centre. And historically, a lot of people have pulled out at the aquatic centre complaining to their support crew that they're too tired, they can't possibly do another 45K, which is understandable because you're a long way into the course. What I highly recommend, I say the same thing every year, is get yourself out of the aquatic centre before you make that decision. So you're probably going to feel rubbish when you're in the aquatic centre, especially if it's dark and your support crew are about to go out for dinner and you think it'd be nicer having dinner than running another 45K. But get out, run the next 4 or 5K, get yourself back onto the trails on the top of the stairs, and then if you still feel like rubbish, pull out then. But at least you've given yourself a chance of getting over that Nellie's Glen climb because it does take a bit of getting over. Try and eat well and get some fluid into you at the aquatic centre to help you feel better quicker. That's probably pretty much it. There's obviously going down Kadumba. If you've got sore knees, going down Kadumba can be problematic. So you have to sort of try and manage that as best you can. If you've got poles can help break you, not break you, as in work like a brake. So help slow you down, can take a bit of pressure off your knees. Some people run down backwards, believe it or not. So if your knees are really hurting and you've got ITB problems, moving backwards can help. Don't trip over. Skipping down can actually help. So that sort of skipping like school kids do, where you so hop hop one foot, hop hop on the other foot, because it changes your knee flexion angle. That can actually take quite a lot of pressure off your knees. And then otherwise, just trying to really shuffle down with super short steps is also better for your knees on that sort of downhill part of the course. The good news is if you get to the bottom of Canumba, you're probably going to enjoy the uphills because your knees don't hurt as much. I was going to talk about downhill strategy. I've pretty much just covered it then. So don't overstride on downhills, especially in that first part of the 22. If you're doing the 22, try and take fairly short and fairly quick steps. And try not to have the brakes on too much. There's parts of Kadumba that get so steep that you have to be slowing down, otherwise you're going to fall on your face. But try and sort of you can't actually lean into it, but just try not to lean back too far so that you haven't got the brakes on the whole time when you're running down there, as much as you can. The short steps are probably, and the high cadence is what helps the most. Now, equipment. So dialing in the right gear. You've hopefully done that already. Hopefully, most of you have found out, got all the mandatory gear, put it in your backpack, and been for a run or two with it, and yeah, tested it out. Try not to use anything new on race day. Sometimes that's impossible to avoid, but for most people, hopefully, you're well enough organised to have everything sorted by now. You should also be aware of the stuff that you want to access. So the most obvious one is food. have that so it's readily accessible, so you don't have to keep on taking off a vest and sort of faffing about trying to find what it is that you're trying to find and then putting it back on, because that sort of wastes your time and energy when you could actually be moving forwards. So this is just the way I do it, and quite a few people do. You don't have to do this, but a naked running band or some sort of a waistband can be a good idea for holding, like it holds gels and can hold a soft flask in it. Um, and so I can often do a one of the long events, so 100K, I think even the 100 miler with and pretty much unless the weather changes, not take the vest off at all. That's pretty much always my aim in a race, is have everything either on the front of it, so the two soft flasks in the front, and then the rest of what I think I need on race day, I'll carry in the running band. And it's only really when something goes pear-shaped with the weather and you've got to get a jacket out, or you've got to like look for your gloves and your beanie and stuff, which does happen, but that's the only time I'll get into the vest. So try and be organized with your gear so that it's efficient on race day, so it's not causing unnecessarily stress and unnecessarily slowing you down. Mental strategies. I've written a couple of articles about this, which are in the UTA hub. So I'll stick a, hopefully you've already seen the UTA hub. It's sort of got all the articles that are relevant to the UTA. We'll stick that back up in the Facebook group just so people can find it if they haven't seen it already. At some point in pretty much all of the races, the long ones, it happens more. Something's probably going to go wrong, and at some point you'll be feeling like rubbish. It's pretty normal. It's sort of part of the deal with ultra running, and it's often to do with lack of carbohydrates. So if you're lacking food and lack energy, then you can start sort of getting cloudy headed, and it puts you into a really negative mind frame. That's when you start asking the questions of, why am I doing this? I could be tucked up in bed, or I could be going out for dinner with my sport crew. I shouldn't have entered this in the first place. All those negative thoughts that go through most people's heads at some point. If you can, you need to try and get yourself out of that. So sugar can do it, caffeine can do it. That might be the time where you do take a hit of caffeine to try and sort of spark your brain out of it. Trying to, it's very difficult, but just trying to have more positive thoughts. Think that you've just spent the last 16 weeks training for this, so you want to make the most of it and not waste the opportunity. Yeah, but I think go into it expecting that there'll be points where you feel bad, probably fair points where you feel like you don't want to finish, and that will go away. So you can get yourself through that. You might have to slow down and walk for a bit. So let yourself walk. Don't beat yourself up about walking. Talk to somebody. If there's somebody around you, you could have a chat to them. That might actually make you feel better or take your mind off the fact that you're feeling so miserable. I'm making it sound a bit glum, but it's just part of ultra running, and it's getting through those spots, which is the real benefit afterwards. You think back and say, "Oh, that's right, I was feeling rubbish, but I carried on," and that's what makes the after one of these races feel even more amazing, because you've got through hard stuff that 99.9% of the world's population don't do anything hard. So the fact that you're choosing to do this and do something hard is actually what is awesome. Um, Actually, also, I made a little note there. Don't make decisions when you're feeling bad. Try not to make like pulling out decisions when you're feeling bad. So think, right, I'm feeling like crap and I want to pull out, but I'm going to get through the next 15 minutes. I'm going to have this gel. I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm going to walk for a bit, and then let yourself have a window of opportunity to get out of the bad patch. And then if you still think you want to pull out, then pull out, because then at least you know that you haven't done it. You haven't made the decision when you shouldn't have. In the plan, I talk quite a bit about sleeping. There is lots of evidence to say that the more you can sleep in the lead up to a race, the more likely you are to feel good. Don't stress about one or two bad nights in the next 2 weeks, and certainly don't stress about the night before if you can't sleep. That's not going to ruin your race. Your body can cope without a night's sleep every now and then. And most people are so nervous before a race that their sleep is interrupted anyway. Also, knowing that you're going to be getting up at some ridiculous hour the next morning is another reason that people sort of keep on waking up thinking, why isn't my alarm going off yet? So bank as much sleep as you can now, and don't stress if you have a couple of bad nights, because it's probably going to happen. Get your gear ready if you can now. So put all the stuff in your bag, or at least have it I put all mine in a plastic container. And then so I know where everything is. And so in the couple of days leading up to it, I'm not running around. I say this, but I don't always do it. The idea is not to be running around looking for your gear or wondering if you've got any wet weather pants or thinking that that some of your gear may not meet the mandatory requirements. Get all that ready now. It takes a lot of stress out of that last few days. Um, so yeah, and then don't change. Try not to change any routines in a major way. So that's why I want you to keep running as many days as is in the plan, as many days as you have been running, and pretty much stick to your normal diet until, like Tamara said earlier, just with those 2 days to go, you start focusing more on carbs, which means that you've got less room for fats and proteins. Um, the last thing I was going to talk about was a race plan. That sort of basically just encompasses everything we've talked about, to be honest. So have a plan, work out what you're going to have for breakfast, work out what you're carrying and how you're carrying it, work out what you're going to eat during the race, have a rough idea of your pacing. Don't be scared to walk up those hills and stairs early on, even if other people are charging past you. Um, if you've got crew, then make sure they're aware of all of this. They know what gear to take to the checkpoints for you. It's all pretty common sense stuff. It really helps if you write it down because it clarifies it in your mind. Some people even write it on their arm or actually take it to the list or give their support crew a list, so that everyone is on the same page. It just makes the whole race day less stressful, more enjoyable, and then because of that, more successful. Here's one from Grant. Grant asked if using heart rate how if and how to use heart rate as a guide on race day. What should I not exceed or what will bring me undone? He feels like long run pace has been pretty good because his legs have always been tired before he started, so it's kept his pace slower just because of the big volume weeks. Um, and he's going into his first 100, so good luck for your first 100, Grant. And yeah, what to do about heart rate? I don't actually give people, I talk a lot in the base training plan about sticking to zone 2, and I'm a massive fan of that. And I do believe that it works pretty much for everyone, just not everyone sticks to it. Race day, I have avoided giving people a formula to follow for race day. And there's a few reasons for that. The main one is people are often more nervous on race day, a bit more stressed. Your heart rate's going to be higher because of that. And then sometimes you're actually following a specific heart rate. So let's just call it zone 3, for example. Um, you could be in zone 2, in zone 3 when you would normally be in zone 2. And so you actually end up running slower than you should, which or being more conservative than you need to. So yeah, I haven't really got a formula. Don't, especially in those longer races and especially early on in a race, you shouldn't be getting up into that sort of zone 4 or 5. So where you really feel like you're burning too many matches, because then that's going to come back and bite you in the second half of the race. So that's when I talked about the pacing and walking upstairs and walking up hills early on. That should stop you from getting those really steep and sharp heart rate spikes. Those are the things that you probably need to avoid the most. So when you are climbing up a couple of those steep climbs on Narrow Neck or going up one of some of the bigger stairs on that top section, don't be scared to slow down just so you avoid those heart rate spikes. So I probably haven't answered that very well, Grant. Sorry, but I'm not going to give you a number to stick to. How much rain has the Blue Mountains had lately? Are we going to have a wet or a dry course? And how many creek crossings will there be? If you're here, Paul, stick a note on and just tell me what race what distance you're. Oh, actually, sorry. Rest of your email, I'm doing the miler. Right, so the weather has been, I touch wood, I feel nervous even saying this, to be honest. The weather has been ridiculous. For the last 6 years, I feel like it's rained nonstop. The last 4 weeks has been amazing. It's still way warmer than it usually is at this time of the year. I ran in a t-shirt this morning and was pretty warm, which is pretty rare it's the 1st of May tomorrow. So I think it was 12 or 13 degrees. We're often on the start line of the UTA. It's 4 or 5 degrees. So at the moment, the trails are in awesome condition. But who knows? The weather the whole world over is seems like it's random. So fingers crossed it stays as good as it has. I think the tracks are at the moment dry enough that they could cope with a bit of rain and they'll actually be okay without being waterlogged like they were last year. So I went down through Lura Forest just last weekend. I ran the UTA 11 course with my daughter, and even Lura Forest is looking really good. There's a couple of tiny wet patches. As for creek crossings, if you go around Nature Trail, there's that creek crossing which is always there. You cross over the creek and then go across the little stepping stones at Lillian's Glen, so that's going to be there. The miler, I understand. I haven't actually done the Bruce's Walk section. I've done everything else, but the I think there might be you might get your feet wet a couple of times on Bruce's Walk, possibly. Um, so Paul actually talked about having multiple changes of shoes. So that's probably not, if you hate running with wet shoes on, that's probably not a bad idea. Have some shoe changes if you've got enough pairs at the various checkpoints. Has the UTA course removed the giant stairs? Uh, yeah, so yes. So we're not going down the Giants and coming back Fernbower, because it's where most of the traffic jams occurred. So in theory, that'll make the course anywhere up to, depending on the person, probably 15 to 20 or even a little bit more faster because you're not going down the Giants and don't have to come back up Fernbower. So it gets rid of quite a lot of the vert. Um, Second part of Chris's question is it worth carrying poles for the little amount of use you'll probably get before Nellie's Glen? Or should you pick them up at the 6 foot checkpoint? So this is for the UTA 100. It depends on the person, to be honest. If you love running with poles and you like using them, tapping up the hills on Narrowneck, even with the poles, then take them. But probably where I think they're actually most useful is for that last, from once you've got down the bottom of Kadumba, coming back up the fire trail is probably where most people use them and get most of their benefit. If you've practiced using them on stairs, then they can be really good on the stairs. So that whole top section from the aquatic centre right through to Wentworth Falls. But you have to have practice with them. If you're not used to using them on stairs, they can actually just feel awkward and get in your way. So it's going to depend on how much you've practiced with them and what terrain you like them on. Um, Chris also asked about fueling. Will some protein during the run help? Um, in theory, Tamara's just talked all about carbs and how many carbs we need, which that's what all the science points towards. There's also a lot of science that says you should have no protein during a run because it's more likely to upset your stomach. But there's an awful lot of people I know, this is just anecdotal, who do have protein, myself included, and actually feel really good. I feel better if if I'm feeling terrible in a race, chocolate milk actually during the race usually makes me feel better. And that's obviously got protein and fat in it. So it depends a bit from person to person. In theory, you should be having only carbs, or if not, mostly carbs. But if you're used to having protein and you want to have some, and it doesn't make you feel sick, then you can. And then he's also said something savory during the run would be a welcome change. What do I recommend? Again, depends on what you've practiced on. Vegemite sandwiches seem very popular. The crisps that they have at the aid stations, just because they're nice and salty, they can be good. Soup is amazing. If you're doing one of the longer races and you're going to be out there during the night, then minestrone soup or pumpkin soup or something that, again, just that's not a horrible sugary sports product, can be a really nice change. And then the more of that you can get down, usually if you can get down quite a few grams of carbs doing that, then you don't have to have as many gels in the next half an hour or hour afterwards. So savory food are great, but it's probably stuff you should have practiced with, unless things have gone completely pear-shaped. So if you're just having one of those days where everything's gone wrong, you think that you might pull out, you haven't been able to eat any food, but you feel like you want something that you've never had before, you might as well try it because you're probably at the point where you've got nothing to lose. For the 50K, should I carry more than 2 bottles? Usually one with water, the other tailwind, and rely on aid stations, or do you carry additional bottles? And if so, would these need to be carried in my pack and have to get them out and stuff around? I have a feeling the mandatory requirement is probably it's often for 2 liters. I don't actually know it exactly for this year. The carrying capacity, So you might have to have the capacity to carry 2 liters, which means in theory you could have 2 empty soft flasks at the bottom of your vest. For most people, so if it was me, I'd race with 3. So I'd have 1 in my running band and then 2 in the front pockets of my vest. 2 is definitely on the lighter side. So I guess what you have to do, Sue, is try and have some sort of an idea of how long it's going to take you to get to each checkpoint. And so if you think you're going to be at a checkpoint every hour, and that you'll consume approximately a liter of fluid an hour, then two bottles is going to be enough. I think 3 would probably be safer, to be honest, but that's just my personal preference. Um, if you haven't got a waistband, then it's obviously going to be trickier because then you're going to have the 2 on the front and then 1 in the vest, which does mean that you have to muck around with it. I hope I've answered that okay. Another question from Okbi is, are you best to try and eat more towards the start of the run in the first half if you're doing the 50? Yes, in a nutshell. The reason for that is it's way harder to catch up if you've got low on fuel, but also your stomach tends to cope better earlier in a race so people usually get more and more sick, and maybe it's because of that water to carb ratio that Tamara was talking about, but you get more and more sick as you go on in the race. So if you can have lots at the start, then in theory you could probably get away with a little bit less in the second half. So yeah, eat as much as you can in the first half, but not so much that it makes you feel sick. It's a very fine line, and it's different for everybody. There isn't, unfortunately, an exact amount or formula that's going to work for everyone. It's hopefully stuff you've practiced with. Is it faster doing terrace ladders or Duncan Pass if you're in the start group? Depends on the queues. So it depends on what everyone else has decided in front of you, to be honest. The fact that they've got both open is awesome. So it hopefully means there'll be nothing like the 2.5 hour queues that were pretty horrendous last year. So it should get rid of them much quicker. If the weather is freezing cold and there's a cold wind and you don't want to be standing on that sort of narrow neck road waiting to get down onto the terrace ladders, then it might be better just doing Duncan Pass. It's only about 400 or 500 meters longer. It's a bit rough underfoot, obviously. Shouldn't be anywhere near as wet and muddy as it was last year, but you'll just have to you'll have to make that call when you get there. If there were no queues, then I would say terrace was quicker. But if there's queues, it's obviously going to change things. Question around any recommendation for mobility exercises mid-race. This is from Michael. In my 100K and miler events, I've got very tight and jammed up midway through, particularly in the glutes. Good question, Michael. I've actually been meaning to do a video about this. Most people, it's their hip flexors, but it's all the same cause. It's usually caused by posture. As you get fatigued and your glute muscles stop working properly, your other muscles kick in to try and help. And hip flexors tends to be one of the most common ones. So you sort of tend to run like you look a bit like you're sitting in a chair. So your hips get lower and further back. Anything you can do to make your hips move more will probably make you feel better. So I often tell people to do the hunter-gatherer squat and the Richard Simmons while they're in checkpoints, just to stretch out that sort of through the lower back and through the backs of the legs. The Richard Simmons could be super effective for your glutes. So if you're feeling terrible and you feel like you can't run properly because everything's tight and jammed up, then try and do the Richard Simmons for 30 seconds, and you might find you buy yourself another half an hour of feeling better. You might have to keep doing it every half an hour, but if you're moving well, it will more than make up for itself in time. Steve has said, I've been sick this week, run down with a cough. Should I get back into training next week or just take it easy until race day? You could probably combine those two things, Steve, depending on how sick you are. So if you're super, super sick, then don't run. Just try and get as much sleep as you can and recover quicker. If you're feeling a bit run down but not too bad, make sure all of your runs are flat and short and you stay in zone 2 so that you're not really taking any cookies out of the jar, not making yourself sicker, but you still get the confidence that you remember how to run. It sounds like a stupid thing to say, but people start getting really nervous when you haven't run for a couple of weeks. So yeah, it'll depend on just how sick you are as to whether you should do some short, easy runs or nothing at all. But yeah, good luck to everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have got the COSI training plan starting reasonably soon. with the base plan and then obviously the 16-week race plan. We're starting a new thing, or I'm starting a new thing. It's sort of a trial this first time. I think it's going to be really good. It is called the Small Coaching Group, and it's basically one of these 1 hour webinars every fortnight uh, for the whole 26 weeks of the program, so the base and the race plan. And there's only going to be somewhere between 10 and 15 people. So it's sort of going to be almost like a one-on-one coaching group, but it'll be an opportunity to ask personal questions. So we probably won't have people on mute. It'll just be sort of like a general discussion for an hour each week. And it could be very beneficial for helping with all the nutrition questions, but also just little tweaks to the training. So things like, I'm feeling sick this week, what should I do? I've got a sore knee, how do I fix that? So it's all that type of thing. So it's sort of as pretty close to one-on-one personalized training, but it's in a small group where I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be really good. We do actually need a few more people to sign up. We've got a few so far. We need probably need another 6 or 7 people to make it actually viable to go ahead. So hopefully some of you, once you get the UTA out of the way, if you're going to do COSI, might want to join us for that. So anyway, good night. Have a good night's sleep. Go and get your 8.5 hours, or at least 8. And I'm doing the expo, so come and see me at the expo. I'll be taping up knees and ankles, and I shall see you then. Thanks, everybody.